Hi, everyone. My name is Sara. I'm also your booker. And after being turned down for very good reasons 8 times, I thought, I think I better do it myself because if I keep going on this way, I'm gonna make myself upset. So you've got me, and this is an impromptu share, but it's always good to hear my own story. I'm still abstinent after all these years, and it is a miracle. And as most of you have heard my story, and I first discovered OA in 1979. My sister lived in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and had written me about it, but she had gone to a gray sheet meeting and she thought she was writing me about OA gray sheet, but we didn't have that out here in California. And so I went to, I did not do well in OA. I need structure. I knew that from my training as a psychotherapist, and I knew a lot that I need structure and discipline, and that's when I really thrive and get things done. So I went to my first gray sheet meeting in 1983 with my sister, and that was a unique experience for me. It was in Harvard Square, and she took me in. It was a packed meeting, so many people, and the speaker was thin, and I sat as close to the door as I could get in case I wanted to make a getaway. But I was completely stunned by her share because she was talking about having been with her family, and that it was not a good experience for her, but she didn't eat no matter what. And those words just jumped out at me, no matter what. And I'd never heard them before. I'd been in AA for a couple of years also, and I had never heard them in AA. Now, that doesn't mean they weren't said, because they tell you take the ear out of your cotton out of your ears and put it in your mouth. I had a lot of cotton in my ears. So it's just because I didn't hear it doesn't mean it wasn't said. But it was a surprise to me. And but my abstinence date is May 24th, not 2009. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that I had a little bit of trouble surrendering to this food plan, surrendering to the fact that I had a disease. I didn't like that idea. And if I didn't like it, then it wasn't so. And I just systematically fought against all the things I didn't like. And I think I've had this disease since I was born. I'm pretty sure of it because I just never had a normal relationship with a bite of food. And I drank as soon as I could drink. I didn't over drink until I started dieting and took sugar out of my food diet. So then I started drinking it. And I bit my fingernails down to the quick. I stole from my mother's purse all the time so I could buy sugar. Uh, I lied if it was convenient and it was to my benefit. I would lie. Didn't even think about it. Had no moral thing. I can't even think of the right word, but I wasn't a very good citizen of this earth. I think that would sum it up. And when I first came into these, both of AA and Gray Sheet, and got some time, I heard people say, including me, my self-esteem is so low, and they would be told to go to therapy. And when I started complaining about my self-esteem, the little old ladies who were probably younger than I am now used to tell me, if you want self-esteem, do esteemable things. And that, again, these programs just come out with these one-liners that completely stun me, because they require action and they're hard. And hard was a 4-letter word to me. I just didn't want to do hard. I had a really awful childhood and I was a miserable person, and therefore you should treat me really nicely and things should be made easy for me. And that's how I led my life. And to have to take responsibility that whatever I got into adulthood with may not have been my fault, but it was my responsibility if it wasn't working. It was my responsibility to find a solution to take care of these things. And I wanted to stay a victim. I wouldn't have admitted that back then. I wanted to stay a victim. I wanted to make everything your fault. And I also wanted you to fix it for me. I didn't want to lift my fingers. So that's why I say today that it really is a miracle that in May I will have, knock on wood, 15 years of abstinence. I've got 25 and a half years sobriety in AA. And I think I'm 76 years old, and I may not always act like a 76-year-old, but I think I'm a grown up a lot of the time. I was writing just before the meeting that two things that are really important, and they're the polarity of each other. I'm really not impulsive anymore. I'm not driven by this anxiety and panic that I was driven all my life. And I thought if I didn't make the decision yesterday, something awful would happen. And a lot of you probably understand that complex, that you already knew something awful was going to happen. And I've learned to slow down. I learned to take that word pause very seriously and to be thoughtful, to think things through. What will happen if I have a craving to eat something this afternoon? What will I feel like when I wake up in the morning? And I know what I would feel like. There is no doubt what I would feel like. And I don't have cravings today, but I did early on. And I won't say they were cravings. They were just thoughts, that somebody spoke last week about that thought about if they knew they were going to die, they had a death sentence of 3 months, 6 months, would they eat certain foods? And I actually thought about that. That's something I thought through. If I got a death sentence, what would I do? And first I thought, well, of course I would eat this one particular food. And then I thought, but then you wouldn't be part of your dying. You would go back to being terrified, scared, panicking. Nobody'd want to be around you, or if they did, they would just be feeling sorry for you. It makes no sense. If you're going to live your life abstinent, you might as well live your last days abstinent also. The polarity of that is this fear of doing things, that if something is big and hard, I want to put it off. That's my nature, is to put it off because I'm afraid. And that just like weighing and measuring our food, and just like learning how to do one thing a day at a time, a meal at a time, sometimes a minute at a time, we break all these big things into small, manageable pieces, and things can get done. And it was one of my biggest defects as a child, as a young adult. I could not finish anything. I would get a great idea. I'm fairly smart. I would get started, and then something would happen in my life. I'd be miserable, and I'd start eating, and that was the end of that. Who knew when the binge was going to be over? And when it was over, I blamed the whatever project I was on. I had no comprehension that I had an allergy to carbohydrates and to sugar. I thought I had a weight problem. I was one of those people that got really heavy, and it was a weight problem. And therefore, I thought, if I could just lose all this weight, somebody might love me, and then I'd be happy. And then that was the answer. I didn't have room for other things in my life. And ambiguity, is that the right word? It's hard to handle ambiguity if you're not a grown-up, that all sorts of things are possible. But back to this self-esteem thing, doing esteemable things, to me, that meant service. It was something that was readily available to me. I was told, if you really want to keep it, you got to give it away and do service. And of course, I was scared of that. I didn't want to work hard. I did not want to commit to anything because my track record was I never stuck to a commitment ever. And so, under 3 months, we give people timer, we give their people who read in the meetings. That's a great service. But I learned that very slowly, with the sponsor's help, doing service as soon as I could, it actually made me feel good. And by feeling good, I didn't want to eat. Those cravings went away. It was
5 to go, Sarah, 5.
thanks, Nancy. Hating myself with such a deep hatred and such a deep shame that I was even alive. It was that bad. I just thought I was a wart on the earth. And doing service and the little ones I managed to do in the beginning, people saying thank you to me, people saying, wow, you did that well. I wish I had the words to tell you. It felt good. And the more it felt good, the more I wanted to do it. It was kind of like the first time I got an A in school. I think I was in 11th grade. And when I got that A, that feeling was so incredible. And I never didn't get an A in that particular class again. And it was that same thing, this feeling of I'm valuable, I can do something well. And I'm also old enough now that I know I can't do all things well. I can't do a lot of things that service. I could no more sit on the structure committee and iron out, things like that than I could fly to the moon. I'm a writer. I sit on the literature committee. I write well. And it feels like a privilege now. And just like all those other polarities that I have, I tend to overdo it because it does feel well. And so setting limits, setting boundaries for myself, nobody's going to do it for me because you would only tell me what your own experience was. I have to figure these things out for myself. And that's what abstinence gives me, one day at a time, weighing out 3 meals, gives me the opportunity to translate all the stuff that we learn by weighing and measuring into our lives, weighing and measuring how much we can do in a day, weighing and measuring how much our heads can hold. I am flying back to Paris in a week and a half, and I made my meals for the plane yesterday. I was on the phone with somebody and I asked her if it was okay if I double tasked, did something. She said, sure. And I wrote on it exactly what's still needed. And now I carry usually 4 meals with me either way that I'm going San Francisco, Paris. And they have to be small enough to fit in my backpack, but they have to be heavy enough that they are very filling. Going back to Paris is very easy because I gain hours, so I get to eat, my next meal comes pretty quickly. Going this way is very much harder, but I never have died, not yet, in these 36-hour days. I think I won't live if I don't get my meal 6 or 7 hours after my last meal. As you can see, I'm still alive. I've never bitten anybody's head off because I didn't get my next meal. I've learned a lot about myself, and I've learned a lot about food, that it wasn't ever food. There was other stuff. I think I'm hungry when I'm actually thirsty. And I'm not sure I've figured that one out. I don't know if my body's figured that out. But if I get really thirsty, I sometimes think I'm hungry. And I think that was true all my life. If I'm uncomfortable, I think I'm hungry. It was the way I used to numb myself. If I got too uncomfortable and I couldn't deal with something, I ate because I just didn't know how to navigate life. And it would knock me out. I would eat until I passed out, and I would pass out. And the next day I would wake up and I would have the same old problem, the one I'd had all my life. How do I stop eating and how do I lose weight? And all those other problems, I couldn't even think about them until I lost weight, and then I could think about them. So I think I got to be about a 50-year-old with, thank you, Nancy, I see that one finally. I think I got to be a 50-year-old with not knowing how to cope very well. And there are people who I meet now that haven't seen me a long time. And usually what they tell me, which is a surprise, is you're so much calmer. I was one of those people who would sit at the desk and my leg would go like this, and or I'd interrupt you. I'd be two people would be talking and I'd interrupt them without even hearing that they were talking. It was very hard for me to accept that you were right and I was wrong. I might not say that right away, but I'd walk off with a resentment. There were just so many things that kept my whole being on high alert, looking for danger. And danger was usually you didn't like me and something awful was going to happen. And my body's not on high alert anymore. There are times I feel anxious. These travels are long and I get this travel anxiety, but I know I'm going to get it. It's not new information. I know I'm going to get it, which is why I make my meals long in advance. I've got both of my bags almost all packed, and it's going to be fairly easy for me to clean up this house and be able to get on a plane without taking an all-nighter, thanks, Nancy, or doing any of the things I thought worked when I was young. So I will end by saying I'm a really grateful member of this program. I never said I was grateful when I was, even the first couple of years, I just didn't want to be this. But I am grateful. I think it's very easy now. It is definitely the softer, easier way for me. And it doesn't show. Unless I tell somebody I have a disease, nobody's going to look at me and say, oh, she has a disease. And I'm grateful for that. So I love you guys. I love this meeting. And I feel very honored that Sara asked me to speak tonight. So I don't eat no matter what.